Good morning, Ambassador Huckabee.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
It's an honor. Thank you for having the conversation.
I'd like to start with the events that happened on the first night of Hanukkah in Sydney, Australia.
Yeah.
The heinous and horrific terrorist attack that happened there. One of a series of events targeting Jewish communities worldwide. Concern has grown about the normalization and escalation of anti-Semitic rhetoric and violence, including in the U.S. Take, for example, on college campuses, where slogans such as "globalize the Intifada" have become the norm. According to the latest ADL data, 55% of Jewish Americans report experiencing some form of anti-Semitism in the past year, and nearly 1 in 5 Jewish Americans experienced harassment, threats, and assault. What is the administration's policy to combat this crisis?
President Trump has appointed a special ambassador for the sole purpose of dealing with anti-Semitism, Rabbi Yehuda Kaplan, who is an incredible mind and force. It shows to some degree how much President Trump is trying to make this a priority, to appoint someone who is solely an ambassador for that express purpose. But I think we also see it in the Congress. A growing alarm is taking place within members of Congress who see these acts of violence across the world, watching, even on American campuses. You mentioned globalize the Intifada. And when people on these campuses scream from the river to the sea, they have no idea what they're talking about. They're clueless, because that phrase itself is a call for the annihilation of Israel. The river is the Jordan, the sea is the Mediterranean, and if in fact you collapse from the river to the sea, then you have annihilated the entirety of Israel. Now, it's not just taking Judea and Samaria, it's taking all of it. And people have no idea that that's what they're chanting or shouting. And if they do, it's even more disturbing.
I agree. Moving to an issue that you know a great deal about, support for Israel. Public support for Israel in the United States and the bipartisan consensus has seen a significant erosion. Amongst Democrats, the support has decisively shifted towards the Palestinians. But amongst the Republican Party, there's also a stark generational divide. The latest University of Maryland survey states that while 52% of Republicans aged 35 and older sympathize more with Israel, only 24% of Republicans in the 18 to 34 age bracket say the same. How do you see the erosion of the bipartisan support for Israel from your vantage point, and particularly this generational gap that has become more prevalent?
It's disturbing, and I think a lot of the cause is that social media is the means through which many younger Americans are getting all of their information. And social media, to be honest, is a sewer. It's like if you took your meals from the sewer, you're going to get sick. And we got a lot of people eating right out of the sewer, and it's no wonder that they're sick. And when I say sick, I mean their minds are sick. They're depraved and diseased with this idea that somehow Israel is the bad guy. Israel is a democracy. Israel is the only real democracy in this entire part of the world. People elect their officials, they can criticize their officials, and boy, do they ever do it. But there's free speech, there's freedom of association. There are freedoms that exist in Israel that do not exist anywhere else in the Middle East. I'm amused when I say amused, I'm actually alarmed when I see people walking around the United States wearing shirts that say, "Queers for Palestine." And I'm thinking, really? What would happen if you wore that shirt in places, even relatively, typically more friendly places like Riyadh or Abu Dhabi? But for heck, sure, wear it in Gaza and see how long you live to tell about it. It's that kind of thing that is a disconnect between reality and what people are chanting. But where does that come from? You know, there's a difference between dumb and ignorant. Dumb is that a person cannot process information. They just don't have the capacity. They don't have an operating system, if I put it in computer language. Ignorance is that the data isn't there. What we're dealing with is not an operating system problem. It's a data problem. We have not downloaded the proper data, the correct, the true data into the minds of younger people. And we've assumed that they're going to grow up intellectually curious and intellectually honest, and that they will look for themselves, but they're not. That's the problem. They're not looking, they're taking at face value what some podcaster says, and the result is absolutely dangerous.
I'd like to move to the military dimension. There appears to be a growing divergence between the Israeli security first approach in the aftermath of the October 7th attacks and the American emphasis on promoting regional stability, de-escalation, deal-making, particularly in Gaza, the Northern Front, Iran, etc. At the same time, the latest national security strategy, which was just released, increasingly frames the Middle East as a lower priority theater and emphasizes burden sharing alongside expanded American arms sales to regional partners. How does the administration view Israel's ability to maintain its qualitative military edge in light of these conditions?
Yeah, the U.S. has not changed its policy. The QME is still a very important part of our overall, not just strategy, it's part of our law. It's baked into the cake. So we're going to keep doing that. We're going to be coming up on the new renewal for the 10-year MOU between the U.S. and Israel. I'm of the hope and frankly of the mind that we need to get accelerated on that, get ahead of it, get some things established. We don't know what the next government in the U.S. or Israel is going to be. So it's important to get some of these things locked in for a longer term. I hope that that will happen. It is in the benefit of the United States, and that's one of the hard parts to communicate to Americans, is that this is not a one-way partnership. Many Americans say, oh, look what we do for Israel. And I'm going to say, not that much really. $3.8 billion in the great scheme of things may seem like, and to me personally it would be a whole lot of money. But in terms of the overall U.S. federal budget, it is not much. But if you look at what we get back, first of all, every bit of that $3.8 billion is spent immediately on purchasing U.S.-produced military and even technological equipment. So we get the money back immediately. What we get in return is an R&D bonus that we couldn't probably ever even begin to pay for. We're talking about a return on investment that some have estimated to be as high as 1,200%. If you take the F-35 fighter jet, America built it through Lockheed Martin, spent billions on it. But we really are not using the F-35 in actual combat situations. The F-35 is essentially a flying computer, highly sophisticated, unlike anything that's ever been developed. When it flies, it is also encapsulating enormous levels of data that is going in through AI to understand everything about that airplane, its use, its application. Israel has now battle-tested that aircraft in ways that we never could or would. The billions of dollars of benefit in what is able to make that airplane better, more effective, is a gift to the United States because of Israel's sharing their battle-tested experience with the F-35. That alone, we're getting multiple times over whatever we have invested in Israel. And if you start adding to that agriculture, medicine, other levels of technology from which we benefit, it's an enormous partnership that it is a much more robust return to the U.S. than most Americans will ever understand.
I'd like to move to the Iranian theater. According to various reports, Iran has begun efforts to rebuild its nuclear program and its ballistic missile capabilities in the aftermath of the 12-day war. If Israel were to determine that further military action is necessary to prevent Iran from crossing both the nuclear and ballistic missile thresholds respectively, would the United States support such an action, and under what circumstances would it consider direct intervention?
It's hard for me to tell you what the U.S. would do because that's a policy decision that'll be made at the White House, not at the ambassador level in Israel. All I can do is point to you what the president has said repeatedly. And he consistently has said Iran is never going to enrich uranium and they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. And he's continued to say that well in advance of the war, and he's never changed that message after the war, and he's continued to say it. Iran, I don't know that they ever took him seriously until the night that the B-2 bombers went to Fordow. I hope they got the message, but apparently they didn't get the full message because, as you have mentioned, they appear to be trying to reconstitute and find a new way to dig the hole deeper, secure it more. It presents a threat, but not just to Israel, not just to the United States. This presents a real threat to all of Europe. And if the Europeans don't understand this, then they're even dumber than I sometimes think they are. And that's rather undiplomatic to say, but you look at some of the things that they say and do, although I will say that I'm happy to see that they put back in some snapback provisions on Iran, which was very important. And the more of those kind of things will help to maybe choke off some of Iran's ability to do what they're trying to do. But bottom line is, I think the president has made it clear that this is not just about Israel. This is about the United States. Iran has threatened America for 46 consecutive years. From 1979, when the Ayatollahs took power, they've always said, death to Israel, death to America, in the same sentence. This was never a separation. Israel is only the appetizer because you're closer and you're an easier target than the vast geographical expanse that represents the United States. But they've never hidden the fact that the real entree, their ultimate goal, is to destroy the United States, because if you want to destroy Western civilization and move the world back to the 7th century and take us back to a place that, thank God, doesn't exist anymore, then you cannot do that without taking the United States down. And that's why they have said for all of these 46 years, death to America.
I'd like to move closer to home, to Gaza. Okay. There are ongoing discussions regarding the transition to stage 2 of the Gaza ceasefire, together with efforts to mobilize international partners to deploy as part of the International Stabilization Force. How does the administration assess the impact of these efforts with Israel's core objectives, dismantling Hamas and ensuring that it does not remain the governing authority in Gaza?
Those are also the core tenets of President Trump's peace plan. If you look at the 20 points, it's all really hinged upon the point of disarming and demilitarizing Hamas and making sure that there's going to be a stable environment for which the rebuilding takes place. If you don't get rid of Hamas, and President Trump has been crystal clear about this, then how are you going to rebuild? What are you going to rebuild? Who's going to want to live there? Who's going to want to spend money there? What investor is going to put property and technology there if Hamas is still tearing everything up? So I don't think that there's any difference between what maybe would be looked at as the U.S. goals and the Israeli goals in terms of a secure footprint there, but also a place where Hamas has no future, no role. And President Trump has said repeatedly, long before the ceasefire, Hamas will have no future in Gaza, it will not have a role in governing it, and it must lay down its arms and let all the hostages go. And as we're talking today, there's still one left. Thank God for the ones that are all out now, particularly the living hostages, but the deceased ones as well. But every day that Hamas sits there, they're getting stronger, not weaker, and that's why there is a sense of urgency. They have to lay down their arms, and they've got to go.
Moving to the northern arena, following the recent meetings between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Ambassador Tambarak, how does the administration assess the current diplomatic contacts between Israel and the Syrian government? And do you think that there's an agreement over the horizon?
I actually think there could be an agreement, and I believe there will be. Now, I can't predict when that's going to happen or what all the terms are going to be. But it is in everyone's interest, including Syria's interest, and al-Shara, he does know that his pathway for any stability in Syria, his pathway for survival, is that he has to be able to have peace with Israel. And the reason I say that, I'm not saying that he and Benjamin Netanyahu are going to sit around a campfire and smoke cigars together and tell old stories. But there is a mutual benefit to both Israel and Syria for there to be a peaceful coexistence in which Israel has no desire to invade Syria or take it over. The last thing they want is to take on more problems, take on more populations. They want no part of that. But they absolutely do and must have a secure border so that there would not ever be another October 7th, coming across their eastern side. All they want is security. They want to make sure that whether it's Syria or some other foreign entity that might use Syria as a staging ground, they're not going to be able to do it. If they can get that, that's all they really want. They would love for Syria to have a prosperous and much more free future than they have had in the past many decades under the Assad regime.
Moving westward to Lebanon, how does the administration plan to balance the stated American and Israeli objective of disarming Hezbollah with the limited capacity of the Lebanese armed forces to carry out that mission?
I think everyone understands that the LAF, the Lebanese armed forces, will have to get stronger. They're trying, they're working at it. It's slower than any of us would like, but we have to give them a chance. We have to help them. And it's almost like as we see the ramping up of LAF, then hopefully Israel's involvement can begin to ramp down. But Israel can't afford to just say, okay, we're done. We're going to just turn it over to LAF and let them have at it, because they're not strong enough to completely take down Hezbollah. And with Iran trying to push more funds into them to help them reconstitute, it's simply a risk that can't be taken. So the U.S. recognizes, and that's why I think our strategy is to work with the own government. It's certainly a better prospect than we have had in the past. But we have to be patient. We have to recognize that Lebanon, their government, has to walk before they can run. And so until they're up and running, there's going to be an evolution and a process rather than an event. I don't see us coming to a place in the immediate future where there's a handshake and a handoff of the complete security arrangement. But I do see that there's going to be an ever-growing responsibility that Lebanon will take for itself. And again, as I said with Syria, nobody would rather see that happen than Israel. The last thing they want is to continue to have involvement on their northern border. It would be a delight to them to be able to say, we're done. Communities like Kiryat Shimona are now completely safe and secure. We don't have to worry about them. Everybody can move back. Wouldn't that be a glorious day for Israel? I think the answer to that is yes.
Ambassador Huckabee, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.